continue with the conversation, but we request that that comes in a summary to allow us have other speakers also take on the conversation. So, Agri, you can continue.
Yes, sorry, I spoke for a long time. I'd actually said everything, unfortunately, sorry. And I have to jump out in a few minutes. So, yeah, so the contentious areas, like I said, the ones that have the best potential.
Agri, are you with us?
With you, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you.
You cannot hear me. I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello.
I agree. I can hear you. So, Diana, maybe you should try and reconnect again.
Okay.
Okay.
In the
Okay.
process of aggregating back
I am back. I am back, and I have to.
to the discussion, can we have Mike speak
Diana,
to
can you hear
us,
me?
because there are a number of issues that have equity issues that have been raised by Agri that are still contagious, where we really need to take action as different stakeholders contributing to the discussion. So, Mike, if you are on, how do you think influential voices like yours can help communicate the importance of equity in the global health to the public? So how can we leverage on voices like yours to bring out these issues and shape the agreement? Mike, do we have you? Okay, Mike, okay, seems to have gone off. Agri, can we continue with you? I see you're back.
Yes, I'm back, and I have to step out. So I was just continue. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can somebody confirm if you can hear me?
Agri, we cannot hear you.
Oh no. Kemi, can you hear me? Kemi, can you hear me?
Hi, Agri. I can hear you. Diana,
Or
can you hear me?
Agri?
apparently
Diana, are
Diana
you able to
can
hear
hear me,
me?
but you can hear me. So I assume others can hear me as well. So yeah, I was just saying
Okay,
that.
I think we still have challenges with our speakers. I would like to
Diana, Diana,
give
can you
an
hear me?
opportunity to one of
I've put it to Diana side.
our director, AHF Africa.
Hi, Agri. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, Kemi, I'm able to hear you.
Okay, I think Diana was having challenges with her network. So I'm just going to try and add her back as a speaker.
Okay.
And we're also mindful of the fact that you said you'll have to step out
Step
in
out
a few minutes. Okay.
and chair
I
another
see
meeting.
Mike. Yeah, I see Mike is also on, so we'll just as well add him
Okay.
and John. So just a moment so that we can bring Diana back as a speaker. Thank you. So I've just requested Diana to come back on as a speaker. So let's hope that she's able to join this time around and it's clear. But while as I said, you were rounding up, you were finalizing your thoughts. If you could just do that before we go to the next speaker. Thank you.
All right. Yes. So yes, I was saying that we still have quite some work to do. The most promising articles are the ones that have a lot of contention and the unfortunate divide between uh, global south, global north, rich versus poor is still really defining these conversations and the positions that are being taken, um, with focus being on really bringing the provisions that have the capacity or the potential to really provide for enforceable, accountable,
Hello, everyone. Thank
commitment,
you for joining.
commitments that would really help us, move in a different direction than the ones that are still in contention. So this has to really be still a focus for many of us. And I was asking that we need to acquaint ourselves with. Can you hear me still? Uh, can you just confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Diana,
Yeah.
are you able to hear Agri?
Sure. Now I am able to hear him. I don't know if
Great.
you can.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
So I was just saying that yeah, we still need to really acquaint ourselves with what's going on because there are propositions that are contentious, like packing. Settled, we would have challenges, in terms of mobilizing the political capital and interest to go and litigate this important article. So our best bet is to have them as part of the primary agreement and not as annexes and protocols, but also really securing language that is really enforceable, that really provides for a good, actionable, provisions for equity and not language that is conditional, as per agreement, depending on national context. So that's still a lot of the language in many of the articles. So yeah, really asking colleagues to mobilize political capital, both in the capitals and in Geneva, those who have access, those who go to Geneva, so that we can push the language to our country, delegations to make the right asks. Thank you very much, colleagues, and I have to step out. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Agri, for sharing with us those insights and also giving us status on where we are standing and also raising the issues that are still contagious that we need to mobilize stakeholders towards the issues that have been raised around One Health, the PABs, and then the language that is being used. So I would like to invite Mike, given the issues that have been raised by Agri, we still need voices out there to speak to some of these issues that we are raising right now. How can we leverage on voices like yours to help out communicate the importance of equity in this global health process?
Thank you, Kim. Am I
Yes,
audible?
Mike.
Thank you, thank you. As I said earlier, um, we're pushing for a fair, a pandemic agreement that's not driven by profit, but it's driven by equity. And I will say, in my opinion, everyone should be concerned about the pandemic agreement because it's an agreement that directly impacts our global readiness and response towards future crises. African nations, our readiness and basically our readiness and response when it comes to future crises. Because the pandemic agreement is actually aimed at creating a clear when if I'm asked what I would want the pandemic agreement to look like, I would say a pandemic that has created a clear and a standardized framework for responding to health emergencies, not just for the well-able and the rich and the big countries, but it's also favoring countries, low and middle income countries, because during the COVID-19 pandemic, as I had also earlier mentioned, there was, and this was a collective observation by, I think, every African state, there was unequal access to vaccines and treatments. And this was a major disparity in healthcare in regards to responding to a healthcare crisis or a, or a pandemic. So a solid agreement that would ensure that all countries, especially the low income nations, an agreement that would see to it that these low income nations get timely access to life saving resources, and a pandemic agreement that prevents unnecessary loss of lives is what we are pushing for. And that's why we need everyone's voice on this. That's why we need to leverage on our platforms, on our social media platforms, because we are in a very digital age. So this is a conversation that everyone should be pushing in whatever capacity that they can be able to. And as I said, this is something that's directly impacting us, because God forbid, say in future another pandemic strikes, we are not sure yet currently that Africa will not be at the mercy of the global north again. And I had mentioned that the global north holding the vaccines in 2020 was something that cost approximately 1.3 million lives. And we know the character, we know the character and the character of pandemics. We know that pandemics are not a good thing. Pandemics they have a direct impact on economic stability, they have a direct impact on supply chains. And I am saying this to further sensitize people and to further prove that we need to leverage on the tools we can, on the communication channels that we can. For example, myself, who is a content creator and an influencer, and I've dedicated one of my missions actually, one of my personal missions, and one of my personal values is to actually use my platform to champion for good. And I think this should be the mantra for everyone. And I was giving one of the examples why we need to raise our voices and be concerned about the pandemic agreement, and why we should push for a fair and a just and a binding pandemic agreement, because pandemics disrupt economies. And in 2020, I'm Kenyan and I will speak on behalf of Kenya. It needless to say, our economy had been majorly interrupted. It had been disrupted, I mean. And the supply chains, the pandemic also impacted food supply, healthcare supplies, and other essentials. So basically, what we're pushing for is a proactive agreement that would not only help economies, but it would also maintain critical services in a nation and prepare businesses for, let's say, rapid response to, in the foreseeable future, minimize economic fallout. So I think that's all I can say for now. We're basically we need to raise our voices. Yeah, whether you're a content creator, whether you're an influencer, whether you're active on socials, in whatever conversations that you're having with your friends, in whatever conversations that you're having, in whatever forums that you go on a regular or you go to, these are conversations that we should raise, especially about the pandemic agreement, because this is a good cause and this has a direct impact on us as a nation, as a community, and also as individuals. Yeah, that's all I can say for now. Thank you, Kemi.
Thank you very much, Agri. Sorry, Mike. I'm stepping in again for Diana. We're having technical glitches as she tries to sign back on as a speaker. I think you have set the tone for the next question, which we're going to turn over to John. You've talked about the importance of, content creators like yourself leveraging your platforms and space to continue to engage on the pandemic agreement. So I want to come to you, John. We know that with your background in community engagement, how can local communities play a role in supporting the objectives of the pandemic agreement? And what strategies can increase their impact on global health policies? We know that communities are often left behind, so even civil society as well. But yet, the nature of the pandemic agreement requires that everyone is involved in one shape or form. So, speaking on communities who are also very well represented today in this fireside chat, how can they what role can they play in supporting the objectives of the pandemic agreement? And what strategies can you share from your experience to help increase that impact?
Thank you very much. Really, what I can say is that communities are in the core of this agreement. And what I mean is that whatever technologies that will be coming out of this agreement, we always need to think about the end user. And in this instance, the end users is our communities. So communities do have a critical role in terms of promoting the agreement and making sure that whatever is being communicated in platforms such as this, it gets to be disseminated at community level. And really, from my experience, the question will be, how do you achieve that? And I believe that you can achieve that through capacity building. By capacity building, what I mean is that we really need to make them aware of the existence of this document or existence of this platform. And I think from Agri's presentation, it was clear that a lot is being done in terms of ensuring that equity and fairness and transparency. And really, the question it could be, whatever that happens at the World Health Summit level, does it get disseminated down to our communities? And I can tell you the answer is no. And I think we've got a big role to play in this instance. And part of that role really is, how do we conscientize our people? How do we invest in capacity building initiatives so that we are all in the same page and we all understand what does this agreement entail? And really, if we have a better understanding of what this agreement entails, including on how to go about evaluating if it's fair and equitable, um, then we can then start moving forward and advocate in gaps that we'll have identified through the process of evaluation. But in conclusion, I think community partners play a critical role in making sure that this agreement is really fair and equitable, and it does address the healthcare needs of those who need access to these healthcare technologies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for that very succinct submission on the role that communities can play and how they can go about that. I just want to check if Diana Tibesigwa is back on and if you can hear us, Diana.
Sure, Kemi, I can hear you now.
Okay, I yield the floor back to you. Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much, and for stepping in. As you step out, I'll still call you back because we want to wind up this conversation. So, Kemi, you will still help the audience appreciate who you are, but also help us uh, share to go with in regarding to the importance of an equitable pandemic agreement.
Okay. Thank you very much, Diana. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So, just listening to the speakers and going back to how long AIDS Healthcare Foundation and partners have been advocating around the pandemic agreement, it goes back to COVID-19 and when we started talking about the need for a global public health convention. And we are still advocating for a global public health convention because, as all the speakers have rightly pointed out, there are gross inequities in terms of the global health architecture or governance system, which tends to favor the global north over the global south. And we see that even in terms of access to vaccines, diagnostics, or therapeutics, but also the ability to locally manufacture. As a continent, as Africa, with all the resources that it has, there is really no reason why, continents like Africa would have to depend solely on the rich nations or on the global north for it to be able to, for whenever it is faced with an emergency or a crisis. We're seeing, for example, right now, the Mpox virus, an Mpox outbreak that is happening, as well as the Marburg virus just recently in Rwanda. And the system has always been designed in a way that means We have to constantly ask. And we need to get to the point where the global leaders generally recognize that for us to have a resilient global health system, it has to be a partnership and not a handout. And it's not charity, it is the fact that every nation on the face of this earth should have access to whether vaccines, to whether diagnostics, therapeutics, and also the ability to locally manufacture, to not be at the mercy of big pharma or rich nations. So why is this important for us? Why are we doing this advocacy as AIDS Healthcare Foundation, working together with our partners like the likes of the Resilience Action Network and Pandemic Action Network? We have John, who's represented here as well from we also have Mike, who is an influencer. Why are we doing this with all our partners? It is because um, an equitable pandemic agreement would allow for global health security. It means that it ensures that all countries, especially low and middle income nations, have access to life-saving vaccines, to commodities, to treatments and essential health resources during pandemics. And this would also help to ensure that we minimize the risk of outbreaks. Uh, Again, another importance of it is the inequities in healthcare. We can see that COVID-19 did demonstrate to us that there was gross inequities. We were losing lives because they couldn't access vaccines. And that is unacceptable in today's health response. If we're talking about building resilient health systems, it's impossible to do that outside of having equity. And those are some of the things AHF is asking for in the articles to ensure that they're not just only equitable, but also involvement of civil society in these processes. And looking also at, because when we talk about civil society engagement, we realize that civil society has not been actively involved in this process, but yet they play a very critical role when it comes to accountability and when it comes to helping to transform the global health security architecture. Civil society have been known before time, and even right from the fight against HIV, they have always played a very integral role. As non, in terms of decision-making processes, they've always played an integral role in terms of holding governments accountable, meaningful participation to enhance legitimacy and to bolster accountability. So these are things that are important to us, and the pandemic agreement must and should accommodate, because we need the involvement and engagement of civil society. Lastly, and another thing I want to address in terms of why are we doing this as the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and our partners? It is because an equitable agreement will help to address these disparities that we are seeing. It will ensure that vulnerable populations receive timely care and resources, which are very critical in terms of safeguarding public health. We talk about technology transfer. Even if even as a continent, we've been working towards, enhancing local manufacturing. It will not be robust and sufficient if there is no tech transfer. If technology transfer that can help low and middle income countries are not addressed, and we're not talking about just any kind of tech transfer. We're talking about the fact that it must not be limited to voluntary and mutually agreed terms, but should allow low and middle income countries the same flexibilities that rich nations have, like the United States, when it comes to using non-voluntary means and other measures to address public health emergencies and other crises. Beyond these asks is the fact that it helps to strengthen international collaboration. We talk about mutual respect between nations. We talk about building trust. And that also must center itself in the public health response. And then preparedness and response. We do not want to always, we should not see public health or public health crises as an opportunity for charity or for handouts, but it should be an opportunity where every continent, whether they're lower middle income or whether they're rich nations, have the same access to all the life-saving commodities that is required to respond effectively and swiftly to pandemics, to crises, or to health emergencies, as the case may be. We all know that pandemics do not respect borders, and as a result of that, it is important that as the negotiations continue, that is taken strongly into account, because what affects one affects all of us. And COVID 19, which happened not too far ago, actually came to remind us of that there are no borders when it comes to pandemic agreements. So AHF will continue its advocacy and call until an equitable pandemic agreement is achieved for all, regardless of where or who they are. Thank you. Back to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Kemi, for sharing with us those insights and also sharing the position of AHF. I would like to invite Mike to share your parting shots, but most importantly, as we part, can you share with us some of the steps that we can take as individuals who have logged into this conversation? What are some of the steps that we can take to support an
I'm sorry, Diana, I didn't quite hear the question.
Oh, sorry, Mike. I was saying that I wanted you to come and share your parting shot in regards to the steps that individuals can take to support the unequitable pandemic agreement, whether by advocating on social media or supporting organization focused, health-related issues. Which steps can we take as we part from this chat?
Thank you for that question. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad, again, I'm glad that this is a conversation we are having, because this is a conversation that needs to be had, that every single person should be sensitized on, that we are pushing for an effective pandemic agreement that's driven not by profit, but driven by equity, because everyone deserves equal access to healthcare, equal access to good treatment, regardless of where they come from, regardless of how big the community or the nation is, regardless of how rich or poor the nation is. The few steps we can take to individually the meaningful steps as individuals we can take to amplify the public demand for transparency and equity when it comes to these global health policies. The first one, I think it's very paramount to really stay informed and to share the information. For example, before I had I had an idea of I had an idea on what the pandemic agreement was about, but I didn't know quite extensively what the content of the pandemic agreement was, or what it was actually about, and I really had to go a step further and educate myself, get all the information I can get on it. So I'm also challenging and encouraging everyone that's been part of this conversation today to educate yourself about the pandemic agreement, about its goals, and also about the importance of having global health equity. We can also, if we are active on socials, you can also actively share reliable information on social media or within your networks or within your community to basically raise awareness about why a fair pandemic agreement matters to everyone. And I don't know whether it was John who was speaking about engaging the community and civic groups being at the center. The importance of engaging the community and civic groups and making them and positioning them at the center of such a fundamental conversation, because I think uh, civil societies and communities coming together to champion for such a cause and advocate for global health and advocate for pandemic preparedness and seeking good resources that help us to respond appropriately to a pandemic is a good cause and is a cause that everyone should be involved in. So I think we should all just collectively take it as a personal responsibility to advocate for a fair pandemic agreement, to advocate for policy transparency, to advocate for accountability, and above it all, to advocate for a pandemic agreement that's not fueled by profit, but that's fueled and driven by equity, and to ensure that every single nation and community are able to protect themselves, whether it is through the knowledge transfer, whether it is through sustainable funding, through whatever means, we are pushing for a fair pandemic agreement. And that's my parting shot. And I'm glad I was part of the conversation. Thank you, Kemi, and thank you to everyone for listening in.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mike. I would also like to give John an opportunity to share his parting shot, especially sharing recommendations on how we can actually build strong community support and voices towards this process. Please, John, come through as you give your parting shot.
Thank you very much, Kemi. To be really short, I think taking from what Mike have said, self-empowerment. So really immediately after this conversation, I think it's very important for us to go look out for the agreement, try and unpack the agreement and look at its context. And understanding its context really will make it easy for us to be able to share it with the affected parties. And as soon as we are all in the same page, we can then move this agenda forward. And moving this agenda forward is not about us understanding, but it's also looking at where the gaps exist, which are the areas that still needs to be strengthened, and how could we work together to make sure that we strengthen those areas. And in that way, I believe that we can achieve an equitable agreement that is not based on profit, like Mike is saying, but that ensures fairness and making sure that everybody has equal access to these health technologies which are outlined in the agreement. Thank you very much, Kim.
Okay, thank you so much, John, and to all our speakers for creating this time to prepare for this conversation. The insights that you have shared, I'm not stopping here. We believe this platform has been able to reach thousands and thousands of people to just get to know what is happening around the process and appreciate the kind of action that we all need to take to contribute to shaping an equitable pandemic agreement. I would like to reiterate that some of these issues and re-echo so that our actions really be catalyzed to the process. I want to mention that the issue of equity is still an issue around the areas of One Health, benefit sharing system. The language that is being used will not really help us achieve an a pandemic agreement. So some of the things that have been coming through this conversation is that we need to mobilize strong political capital. So it's upon us, our institutions, individuals, if we have government of representatives on this call, this call actually comes to you that we need to mobilize our political representatives, country representatives who are negotiating on behalf of different member states. We need to mobilize them and share this information like it's being advised here for them to appreciate the need to take the right action and inform the process very well. We also take note of issues to do with sharing information. Different platforms exist where we share information. AHF has been able to provide and put in place a number of platforms where this information is shared. Right now, we are using traditional media, we are using influencers, we are having physical conversations with political leaders, we are using letters, writing to the responsible people who are part of this process. So we are using different platforms and measures to reach out to communicate our position as an organization and also working with other stakeholders. So we will continue to engage in this conversation in other platforms. And we would like to thank everyone who has logged in here. Please take action. Your inaction may lead us to having, a pandemic agreement, which is just going to do more harm. So we encourage stakeholders, institutions who are involved in this process to act. So I would like to thank everyone, and I would also like to bring this chat to a close. Thank you so much for logging in and listening in. Have a good morning, good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.